We were back at another race in Turkey, except this time it was quite the contrast from last year. We had yet another wet race, except this time the conditions were a lot more stable, and surprisingly enough, we had no DNFs. The track remained consistently wet throughout this race outside of the racing line, which left a lot of teams really confused in terms of what to do for their tire strategy. We also had some teams take engine penalties, so we were excited to see those overtakes happen on track. Cass, when we look at the first half, how'd you score it? What caught your eye? Tell me about it.
I just want to say a big ol' thank you to Carlos Sainz. I mean, my goodness, this man carried in the first half of this race. Carlos was just seemingly picking off every other driver one by one. Honestly, he is the sole person that raised the racing score on my end up to a 7, because without this man, nothing would have happened in this first half. I had my excitement and drama like way down at a 3 each because there just wasn't all that much. A couple of spins, some time penalties that really just made no sense, and then Carlos making his way through the field. That was it. That's really all we saw in this first half. So this brings my total score for the first half to like a 4.25, which, yeah, is low, but when you look at it, it was really only 2 drivers providing us with any action at all, and that was Lewis and Carlos. I mean, you did have Daniel making a couple of moves at the start, but the McLaren just did not have the pace today. It's kind of sad because we had such an exciting race here last year, and this time it just didn't really compare, but they can't all be exciting.
It really did feel like an underwhelming wet race. You had most drivers keeping it clean on the track. The top 4 got away really well, and there wasn't all too much stress on who was going to finish on the podium at this point in the race, which is why I only scored my excitement at a 4. I did end up scoring my racing though at a 6. I was pleasantly surprised with the Tsunoda and Hamilton battle. He really defended him off. Meanwhile, all the other drivers, it seemed, that Hamilton got past kind of just opened the door for him, and they were kind of really boring overtakes just off of DRS zones. Carlos, on the other hand, was doing stellar moves on that final chicane, and in terms of the drama, I scored it quite higher than you at a 6, and my reason for that was because of those 2 penalties that were given out. It was kind of funny to see Alonso call Gasly stupid for spinning him and then punting Mick that same lap later. The other reason why I scored it higher was because you had a lot of these teams scrambling to figure out what to do with these tires. You had McLaren bring Daniel in, trying to see if a new set of inters would be a major pace advantage. It wasn't, so I was really unsure of what was to come. So when you combine my scores together, it comes out to a 5.3 for the first half. I'm gonna round that down though to a 5.25. It's safe to say the first half was the duller part because it really started to ramp up in this second half.
And thank God it did start to get more action-packed because we were in serious lack of just about anything going on in this race, but it really flipped on its head when all of these pit stops were coming into effect. I mean, that definitely raised the excitement because, you had Max coming in having an amazing 2.1 second pit stop. Valtteri comes in right after him, and then Carlos has an absolutely dreadful pit stop. It made me so angry because I thought this poor guy has just made so much progress when seemingly nobody else has. Is it going to get ruined by this pit stop? It was so frustrating to watch. So my excitement was definitely raised a little bit more in the second half. I had it at a 5 just because it was pretty clear with the front runners that everything was more or less going to be okay, at least with Valtteri and Max. But it was that mix of like the 4, 5, 6 that was starting to get dicey. I also had drama at a 5 as well, for very strange reasons, like the weird pit stops, Seb being on slicks for one reason or another that still made absolutely no sense to me. Apparently he actually wanted softs, and it was the team that compromised for mediums. Like, what was that all about? But the real kicker here was the racing, which I had once again at a 7, largely again because of Carlos, and of course that amazing battle between Checo and Lewis going side by side into like 4 or 5 corners. Checo going wide. There was a little bit of drama not knowing, did he go over the line? Was it going to be a potential penalty? Some people arguing that he should have backed out. Others saying it was totally fair. It was just super exciting to see, and this is the type of wheel-to-wheel racing that I love because neither one of them wanted to back down. So this puts my second half score at a 5.6. I rounded it down to a 5.5.
I mean, that battle alone is what attributed my 7 for the racing score. I'm sure Checo was being instructed to hold off that position as much as possible to help the team out, and it really showed in this instance. It's the type of wheel-to-wheel racing I love to see because they're putting everything on the line for even just, I think at that point it was 5th place. The second half definitely had me more engaged and excited. I scored it at a 6. I was interested in the hunt that Hamilton was on to try and get back on that podium. And also on top of this, you had the pit stops coming into play. Checo just came into the pits, essentially letting Hamilton by. Was he pitting too early, I was thinking? Did this just throw away his potential podium? In the end, we know what happened, but really confused, exciting, didn't know what was going to be the outcome. It was even funny at one point because he had Charles leading this race in his Ferrari, trying to see if he could go the whole race length on his one set of intermediate tires. Some really funny back and forth between him and his race engineer, and evidently he had to come into the pits because those intermediate tires were seriously dropping off towards the end of this race. You had some photos be revealed that they could potentially have popped had they gone for the full length. The only driver to go the full length without a pit stop was Esteban Ocon, ending up only in 10th place. On top of that, that's what scored my drama a 6 because there was the back and forth between Hamilton and his team on whether or not he should pit or not. He was super frustrated that he did pit, but in the end, who knows, he could have suffered from a tire blowout, losing all of his points. So when you combine all of my scores together, it comes out to roughly a 6.3. Gonna round that down also to a 6.25. So quite the unusual wet race than we were expecting, but when you combine both of our scores together, the Turkish Grand Prix of 2021 comes out to a 5.25. Here's how the race compares to the other races so far this season, and I'm really interested to see who we're gonna get now on our segment of Driver Watch. I feel like we were following a lot of the same drivers throughout this race, so there might be some that we uncover right now.
There were some drivers that I honestly completely forgot about in this race. I don't know if they were ever shown on TV. I mean, what did the Alfa Romeos do? I couldn't tell you.
Well, we might just get one of those right now. Let's see who it's gonna be.
So looks like we have Valtteri this time, which honestly, I guess that plays out. We haven't spoken about him much because he was just kind of in a league of his own in this race.
I'm really happy to see his performance today because, you know, his time with the team is very limited.
I mean, when you think about his performance at this track last year, there are some very stark differences. This time around, Valtteri clearly had the pace, he felt comfortable in the car. Anytime that Max would close the gap even just a little bit, it seemed like the team would notify Valtteri and he was like, cool, thanks guys, I'll get the job done, and would continue speeding away.
Valtteri did have to take some risks because he did have to pull an overtake on Charles, who had yet to pit in this race, and he had to do it on a wet surface. So it was great to see him get his elbows out, even though he was a shoo-in to win this race. What were your thoughts on the Turkish Grand Prix? Let us know down in those comments. What did you think of the opening lap incident between Alonso and Gasly? Was the battle between Hamilton and Perez the best wheel-to-wheel action we've seen so far this season? We want to hear from you. While you're down there, don't forget to leave this video a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and we will catch you in our next video.
Bye!